Before we jump into things today, I just want to ask you a quick favor.
Yeah, please do.
Make sure you follow the Contrarian HR on Substack, Spotify, YouTube, and on TikTok. That is really the place where we take a light approach on things, and you definitely won't want to miss what we're putting out there.
Absolutely.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is unpacking a deeply provocative topic, and it's one that, well, it absolutely affects you if you exist anywhere in the modern workforce.
Right, yeah. No matter your level.
Exactly. Whether you're a brand new employee, a middle manager, or sitting in the C-suite, the fundamental structure of your workplace is changing rapidly, and we need to examine why.
Because we are looking at a massive, undeniable shift in corporate structure right now. And I think what makes it so compelling is that it's happening quietly.
So quietly.
Across almost every sector. And it's fundamentally altering how businesses operate on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, which brings us to our sole source for today's deep dive. It's this fascinating article from The Times by Harry Wallop, and it's titled, How HR's Expansion Strangled British Businesses.
What a title.
I know, it doesn't hold back. And this piece was actually sparked by a recent panel discussion organized by podcaster and campaigner Tanya de Grunwald. It basically asks this really uncomfortable question about human resources and its impact on the broader economy. So, okay, let's unpack this.
I think, and this is crucial to set the stage right out of the gate here, the goal of this analysis is not to bash HR professionals.
No, definitely not.
We are examining a structural phenomenon. We're looking at this massive expansion in corporate structure and asking a purely data-driven question. Like, how is this specific shift impacting national productivity?
Right.
Because when you look at the macroeconomic data alongside the internal corporate data, the correlation is, well, it demands our attention.
It really does. And the numbers outlined here, they totally reframe the entire conversation around corporate overhead. Let me just share some of the hard data with you listening because it illustrates the sheer scale of this shift.
The numbers are wild.
They are. So back in 2010, the UK HR workforce sat at about 284,000 people.
Okay.
But by the end of last year, that number had surged to 478,000.
Which, if we connect that to the bigger picture, is an explosive rate of growth for a single non-revenue generating department.
Yeah. I mean, to put that 500,000 figure into perspective for you, there are now more people working in human resources in the UK than there are doctors or lawyers.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you compare it internationally, the UK has almost twice the proportion of HR staff as the European Union.
It's something like 60% more than the United States.
Exactly. 60% more. Harry Wallop even notes, kind of humorously in the article, that if you're a humanities graduate struggling to find a place in the modern economy, HR is basically the booming industry to target.
Yeah, and this is where we have to look at the broader economic environment where this boom took place. Because while the HR sector was experiencing this, unprecedented growth, national productivity in the UK completely flatlined.
Totally stagnated.
Right. Now, obviously, correlation does not automatically equal causation.
Sure.
But there is a growing, very vocal disquiet among economic and business experts right now. Bosses are already battling high taxes, inflation, a sluggish economy.
So rough out there.
It is. And they were starting to look inward. They're asking if this massive, continuous expansion of HR headcount is actually creating a drag on profitability and, agile decision-making.
And there's a specific tangible monetary value attached to that question, which I actually found to be one of the most compelling parts of the whole analysis.
The think tank data.
Yes. Policy Exchange. They crunched the numbers and estimated that if the UK simply had the same proportion of HR workers as the US, not eliminating the department, literally just reverting to the US average, the British economy could be 10 billion better off.
10 billion left on the table. And when you think about what that money represents in the real world, it's profound.
Right, because it's not just a number.
No, it's capital that could be deployed into research and development, into capital investments, or direct wage growth for frontline employees. When a business allocates an ever-increasing percentage of its operating budget to internal management and compliance rather than its core commercial product, it naturally stifles growth.
It has to.
Yeah, it forces us to look critically at what all these additional roles are actually doing day to day to justify that $10 billion on price tag.
Which brings us directly to how the role of HR has completely morphed over the last decade. Because we all know the traditional scope.
Right, the basics.
Yeah, managing operational benefits, making sure you get your discounted gym membership, the private medical insurance, free Friday ice cream.
Yeah, that's fun stuff.
The fun stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
And ensuring basic legal compliance. handling the administrative onboarding. But the titles alone today tell a completely different story. We're seeing this massive proliferation of executives carrying titles like head of people and culture.
And that word culture, that represents a massive expansion of mandate.
Huge.
There's this quote from Octavius Black. He's the co-founder of the Mind Gym consultancy and one of the panelists at the event that sparked this article.
Yeah.
He articulated this shift perfectly.
What did he say?
He noted that HR has become a cost center with a moral purpose, rather than a business function with a commercial purpose.
A cost center with a moral purpose. I
Yeah.
mean, that suggests a complete transition from a background operational function to an entity that's actively trying to shape employee behavior, values, and workplace philosophy.
Exactly.
But I think, to be fair here, to fully understand this, we have to look at the external pressures driving it. HR didn't just seize this mandate in a vacuum, you know?
No, they didn't.
The modern workplace is incredibly complex. They are navigating a daily minefield. They're dealing with the traditional disciplinary issues, lecherous bosses, all of that. But they're also adapting to Gen Z workers who have fundamentally different expectations about the vibe of working and work-life boundaries. And they're constantly policing disputes that could escalate into highly damaging public litigation.
And that legal minefield is arguably the primary catalyst for this entire expansion. The structural data absolutely validates the immense pressure HR departments are under.
The tribunal stats, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at the shift over the past 8 years.
Mm.
If you analyze disability discrimination tribunals in the UK 8 years ago, 9.7% of them involved the worker citing anxiety as a factor.
Okay, 9.7%.
Last year, that number jumped to 30%.
30%. That completely shifts our understanding of what HR is actually dealing with on a daily basis.
Right.
Nearly a third of these cases now hinge on something as internally subjective as anxiety.
And imagine being a department manager attempting to navigate that legally.
Yeah.
Anxiety manifests differently in every single individual.
Of course.
Yet, the business is legally obligated to provide reasonable adjustments. And the definition of what constitutes a reasonable adjustment is constantly evolving through case law.
It's a moving target.
It is. So if a manager gets it wrong, the company faces a devastating tribunal. When a business faces that level of ambiguous, high-stakes legal pressure, the immediate corporate reflex is to build a fortress of compliance.
Right. You hire more specialists?
You hire more specialists, you expand your headcount, and you build internal bureaucracies to ensure no one steps out of line.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because once you build that massive, well-funded compliance fortress, it has to justify its ongoing existence.
Naturally, scope creep.
Exactly. The scope naturally creeps. So to mitigate the risk of those tribunals, HR implements training. But the focus of that training has shifted dramatically from the operational to the social and cultural.
We're not talking about forklift safety anymore.
No, we are no longer just talking about software onboarding or warehouse safety protocols. The training is now heavily focused on complex social issues: anti-racism, modern slavery, allyship. The piece uses HSBC as a prime example.
Yeah, they're very upfront about it.
They are. It notes that they actively promote their allyship and unconscious bias training right on their recruitment website. It's become a core piece of their employer branding.
And this transition into social and cultural training leads us directly into the highly debated realm of mandatory online modules, which, when a company attempts to standardize a quote-unquote moral purpose across thousands of employees, they inevitably rely on these digitized multiple-choice scenarios.
Right, the click-through modules. And I want to be very clear with you listening right now. We are simply conveying the ideas in the source material here. We aren't taking any political sides.
Absolutely, just reporting what the Times article highlighted.
Right. So the Times piece highlights a specific training module to illustrate this shift and the friction it causes. The scenario asks employees to evaluate a situation where a worker named Richard stops sharing jokes and adopts a cold manner toward his colleague, Jonathan, after Jonathan changes their pronouns to they/them.
Okay.
So the employee taking the module has to decide if Richard has done anything wrong. According to the module's parameters, the correct answer is yes, Richard is wrong. And the justification provided is that Jonathan is likely to feel isolated.
Right. And what's fascinating here is how the author of the article critiques the underlying mechanics of this type of training.
The woolly thinking aspect.
Yes. The critique really centers on the sheer complexity of human psychology being flattened into a binary multiple-choice question. The author argues that Richard's coldness could stem from a multitude of factors. Perhaps he is harboring genuine prejudice.
Mhm.
Or perhaps he feels deeply uncomfortable being asked to navigate linguistic changes that conflict with his own biological worldview. The author's core argument is that human friction is deeply complicated, and a 15-minute online Q&A is highly unlikely to alter anyone's deeply held convictions.
It just doesn't work like that.
No.
No.
It's categorized in the piece as woolly thinking that prioritizes performative compliance over empirical results.
And the data actually supports that skepticism regarding empirical results. The article references findings from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission regarding unconscious bias training specifically.
What did they find?
The commission found that this type of mandatory training actually has the potential for backfiring effects.
Which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That backfiring effect is rooted in basic behavioral psychology.
How so?
Well, when you force highly capable professionals to sit through mandatory modules that actively police their internal unconscious biases, it often triggers reactives.
Huh? People push back.
Right. Instead of fostering a harmonious, inclusive environment, it can breed resentment, division, and just a pervasive sense that the workforce is not trusted.
So if we step back and look at the whole landscape here, we have an HR sector that has ballooned in size and cost. We have national productivity that is completely stalled out. There's this fundamental shift from commercial objectives to a moral purpose, and a reliance on compliance training that the data suggests might actually be making workplace culture worse.
It's a perfect storm.
It really is. So what does this all mean? How do organizations actually course correct without exposing themselves to massive legal liabilities?
Well, the source material offers a highly specific and I'd say somewhat radical blueprint for a way forward.
From Neil Morrison, right?
Yes, Neil Morrison. He's the head of HR at Severn Trent, which is a massive water authority. And it's really worth noting he explicitly rejects titles like head of people and culture.
Oh, he hates those titles.
Despises them. His entire philosophy is jarringly simple for the modern era. He argues that HR's sole mandate is to drive organizational performance.
And he is incredibly blunt about what HR should not be doing. He explicitly states that trying to drive a social policy agenda within an organization makes zero sense.
Zero sense.
Yeah. The philosophy is that a corporation is not a moral arbiter. It's a commercial enterprise. The job of HR is to remove friction so that employees can do meaningful, productive work.
And to move this from abstract philosophy into actual practice, Morrison implemented several highly specific actions for leaders and managers to consider. Actions that really challenge the current industry standard.
What's the first one?
The first targets the endless cycle of performance reviews. He reduced them to a single annual event.
Just once a year.
Once a year. Actively stripping away the constant form-filling and excessive box-ticking that consumes so much managerial bandwidth.
Which immediately returns countless hours of productive time back to the business.
Exactly.
Okay, the second action addresses the exact training bloat we just analyzed. Morrison advocates for and implemented a mandate to cut the time spent on internal training by 25%.
And the crucial caveat there is doing so without sacrificing actual learning or necessary compliance.
Yeah.
It's an exercise in respecting the workforce's time.
Right.
If a new data privacy protocol takes 10 minutes to comprehend, it does not require a mandatory 2-hour interactive seminar. It requires a clear memo and a signature.
Keep it simple. And the third specific action.
It involves untangling the recruitment process. He advocates for radically speeding up hiring by stripping out layers of management sign-offs.
Oh, anyone who has navigated the modern job market knows the pain of that. The 5-round interview process that drags on for months.
Just because multiple vice presidents need to sign off on a mid-level hire.
It's exhausting. Removing that bureaucracy sounds ideal. But I have to ask. Morrison's blueprint sounds great on paper, but if you slash training by 25% and you strip away management sign-offs, aren't you just inviting those exact same anxiety-related employment tribunals we just established are driving this whole expansion?
Good, fair point.
How do you implement this without it turning into an immediate disaster?
Well, this raises a really important question, and it brings us to the psychological core of the entire article. Because the reason the current bloated system exists, the reason those tribunals are such a threat in the first place, is due to what the source identifies as a generation of substandard managers.
Wow, that is a harsh assessment.
It is.
But it completely recontextualizes the conversation. We aren't just dealing with overzealous HR departments, we are dealing with a crisis of frontline leadership.
Precisely. The argument is that over the past decade, middle managers have become paralyzed by indecision and a fear of litigation. They are terrified of those anxiety tribunals.
Sure.
And they're terrified of having awkward, difficult face-to-face conversations with underperforming team members. The path of least resistance for a manager who lacks genuine leadership skills is to simply outsource the problem to HR.
Oh, we see this constantly. An employee is consistently late, or a project is delayed because of poor communication, and instead of the manager pulling that person aside to address the standard of work,
They open a ticket.
they open a ticket with HR. They completely outsource the friction of human management.
And the HR department, which is already looking to prove its strategic worth and justify its 500,000-strong headcount, gladly accepts this delegated authority.
Of course they do.
But here is the critical flaw. HR does not produce the commercial product. They cannot measure their success by revenue generated or units shipped. So, to prove their efficacy, they implement endless key performance indicators based almost entirely on behaviors rather than actual tangible productivity.
Which creates the ultimate culture clash, the author critiques. Because when you combine managers who refuse to manage with an HR department that measures its success by tracking behavioral metrics, you inevitably end up infantilizing the workforce.
You do.
You take highly trained, capable adult professionals and subject them to a system that treats them like wayward children needing constant surveillance. Or worse, like walking legal liabilities just waiting to trigger a lawsuit. It strips all the autonomy and trust right out of the professional relationship.
It replaces a culture of high performance with a culture of defensive compliance. And when the primary goal of the workday shifts from how do we build the best product to how do I ensure I don't violate a behavioral KPI,
The engine stalls.
the commercial engine of the business completely stalls. That 10 billion productivity gap policy exchange identified, it isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It is the mathematical result of an entire workforce focused on internal navigation rather than external output.
Man, okay, let's quickly recap the terrain we've covered today because there is a lot to digest here.
A ton.
We started by looking at the sheer, undeniable data. The UK HR workforce exploding to nearly 500,000 people, vastly outpacing international competitors, all while national productivity essentially flatlined. We explored the evolution of the role, tracking its shift from administering basic operational benefits to adopting a moral purpose, fueled largely by the massive legal threat of increasingly subjective tribunal cases.
Yeah.
We unpacked the friction caused by mandatory social policy training, noting the evidence that it can often backfire. And finally, we analyzed Neil Morrison's blueprint for a course correction forcing HR back into a purely performance-driven role, slashing the bureaucratic bloat, and confronting the uncomfortable reality that we need managers to actually step up and manage again.
It is a profound argument for rethinking how we structure corporate life. But I want to leave you listening with a final, lingering thought to really explore on your own.
Let's hear it.
We spent this time analyzing the deep friction caused by HR acting as the corporate culture police. But if an organization actually embraces this new blueprint, if HR completely strips away its pastoral care, abandons the social policy agenda entirely, and reverts to a purely commercial background function, whose responsibility does it actually become to ensure a functional, inclusive environment?
That's the real question.
Are our day-to-day managers actually equipped, trained, and emotionally intelligent enough to handle complex human conflicts without HR acting as an ever-present safety net? Or would stripping away that infrastructure reveal that the modern workplace simply isn't ready to govern itself?
That is a brilliant tension to leave unresolved, and it is definitely something to chew on the next time you log into your company's portal or sit down for your next performance review. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it gave you some valuable, actionable insights into the hidden structures shaping your workday and perhaps your own leadership style. Remember to stay curious, keep questioning the status quo, and keep learning. We'll see you next time.